Everybody, and welcome to the Rabbit Trail Podcast. My name is Greg Harris. I'm the senior pastor at the church that sponsors the podcast, called Olive Branch Community Church, and you are listening to episode number 163.
163.
No. Yeah, so we're just glad you guys are joining with us as we just dive into a pretty serious conversation today, as we're jumping off from where we were on our sermon last week, which was a conversation from our series, and we're going to kind of let the rabbit trail run from there, and we've got a guest with us today as well. So why don't you guys all say hi and let them know who you are.
Oh, hi. Hi, new guest.
Hi.
Okay.
That was awkward.
That's the intention.
You have not noticed
always.
that we always open, the first 4 minutes are just
Awkward.
total awkwardness.
Just complete. In fact, people don't listen after the first 4 minutes.
That's what I've been told on the internet.
No, just
So it must
go
be
for it,
true.
Stephen.
Hello, welcome to the Rabbit Trail. We're already off exploring things different than what we're talking about. But if you're watching and listening still after the 4 minutes, make sure that you like and subscribe if you're watching on YouTube. And if you're watching on Spotify, or if you're listening on Spotify and you're listening on iTunes, give us a like, give us some stars, but the most important thing you can do is share us with your friends.
And I'm Brent Branchard. I am the Connection Pastor here at Olive Branch Church. And again, we would love to hear your comments or read your questions online and discuss them. And you can do that by emailing us at rabbittrail@obcc.church. rabbittrail@obcc.church. Quick reminder, it doesn't have to do with the topic we're on. If you have any theological or life question, please send that in so we can discuss it further.
Even the questions that we've received about scabs. But there's lots. So anyway, we're glad you guys are joining with us. I want to introduce my wife, Teresa Harris. She's going
Hi.
to...
Glad to be here.
Hello, Teresa, everybody. Hey, Teresa.
You know what's fun is when you're on, like, we get a ton of comments. Like, it's like so many of our female listeners are like, I love it when... They just enjoy you being here.
I'm glad to be here.
I'm passing it on. So... All right, Brent, what are we doing, man? Where are we going?
Where are we going? Well, this is the second sermon in the series, What Do You Say When? And so basically it's just when you're going to be faced with some gut punch questions and situations, especially, parents to kids coming up talking about being pregnant. I know about that. And, talking about things like, gender issues and loss of faith and everything else. So pay attention for the next few weeks, because we're going to be talking about some really deep subjects and really just kind of how do you prepare for those conversations and how do you handle those conversations in a way that, and I'm trying to remember the 3 points, that shows love, that speaks truth, and that stays close. And I thought that is a really good metric to follow.
Yeah.
So.
Love them, give them truth, and stay close, and hope should be able to stay alive. So that's mainly the point. You're not going to solve it, but you're definitely going to be able to keep the hope up. So we talked this week about a pretty difficult subject, though, right? So
Yeah.
we said we would cover it here in detail.
Yeah. I mean, I thought you did a good job. And in fact, we talked about, when your daughter comes to you or your son comes to you and says, I'm pregnant, or I've gotten someone pregnant, and then from that too, it went into the discussion of life and abortion and things like that. So it was a very, I thought you did a great job. We just buried my dad on Tuesday, and so we had a lot of family and some family friends staying with my mom, and they watched it. My niece from Oklahoma watched it, and my mom's best friend Barb watched it, and so they have all dealt with that topic in one way or another. The pregnancy part, and they thought you did a really good job. It really struck a chord in numerous people that were in that room.
Cool.
So and it was funny because Barb, she lives in Arizona, and I was thinking I wasn't going to be at church on Sunday, and I knew that they were planning on coming. They ended up staying and watching it at home. But I was like, ooh, this is a really heavy topic, to come in and, have somebody out of state that's never really been to our church before and go, ooh, okay, I want to be inspired. And it's like, whoa. But she thought it was amazing. She's like, I can't wait to listen to the podcast. and I really want to watch the rest of the series as well. So I thought you did a really good job with that. So.
Cool. Yeah, I think again, as we talk about what we said is we would discuss more of the conversation on abortion in the podcast, because there's just no way to cover all of the issues in the dealing with abortion. Even in one podcast, we can't cover all of it. But I do want to just make it clear right at the get-go, a couple things. We acknowledge that we know this is a sensitive and difficult topic for many people, that there's such a high percentage of people who've had abortions or been involved with an abortion of some kind, that we know that this doesn't always feel like the safest conversation. Our goal is not to throw shade, make people feel unnecessarily guilty about that, and I mean unnecessarily. But at the same time, we as a church and we as Christians are adamantly pro-life, and we believe that there is an argument and a reason why we believe that, and we need to lay that out clearly. So, just I guess that's like the hey, heads up, we love you guys. We're not trying to hurt anybody, and but we need to make this clear. I believe for continuing for our church in a generation. I don't know, your thoughts anything on that yourself?
Yeah, I think that just because I think that it is a tender subject, but it'd be unloving to not discuss it in a truthful way.
Yeah.
So it's important.
Stephen, anything you want to throw down before we get moving?
No, I'm ready to go. I'm ready to go into the subject. I mean, it covers a broad swath of things, from those who are hurting to those that are trying to make an argument for or against. So,
yeah. So, I guess a great place to start is kind of all of us. Where have you encountered this, and what kind of arguments have you come across? Kind of more in your life as you've dealt with some of these things. I mean, not to like, hey, I know so and so who did. That's not what I'm saying, but like when you've gotten into these conversations, what has it been like for you? You know, for me, there have been some intense conversations over this subject, and then there have been some dismissive conversations, and then there have been a lot of people who've confessed and talked through things. So I've got a kind of a mixed bag on it. Yeah. I mean, how about you guys?
Wow. Well, it's kind of hard because we have a pro-life ministry at the church, so there's that involvement. But then also I went to a liberal college that argued for pro-abortion, and so I dealt with intense discussions politically and ideologically. The arguments with people on the more extreme pro-life or pro-abortion position is mostly about me arguing when do you get your human rights and when do you get constitutional rights? And that actually throws them for a loop because they think I'm going to bring out the Bible or something. So, and just saying the simple, you believe in human rights? Yeah, I value them much. Well, when did they happen?
When did they start?
When did they start? And so that's a good conversation to have with someone who doesn't really respect the Bible and thinks that we just get all of our opinions because we're told them. The other one is just apologetics, arguing not just because the Bible said so, but actually discussing what is the image of God theologically, why is it there, what does it have to do with the abortion position, and then you have this whole other medical side that you have to kind of consider in a world that's kind of you substituting what we used to think as value that you are created for a purpose to something like transhuman. You're using medical research in a way that no one has ever used it before, and no one in history has ever had these problems before. So
right. Brent, what has been kind of your world in some of these conversations?
I mean, from a personal standpoint, and I think I mentioned it a little bit last week but my mind has been in a complete fog, so I have no idea what I said, so I apologize if I repeat. But, my youngest daughter, Corinne, when she was 20, so, she was going to a Bible college and living there, and we weren't really completely aware that she was dating somebody, and then they broke up, and about a month after they broke up, she found out she was pregnant.
Right. And, you told us last week.
And so, she came in to our room and told us that she was pregnant. And, part of just went through my head was just shut up, just love her right now. You'll have plenty of time for discussions later, but right now she just needs to know that it's okay,
The abortion conversation never came up.
And I will say, though, as a parent, hearing that she was pregnant was like a total kick in the gut, you know. I mean, just takes all the air out of you, you know, and it's just like, oh, and you do think things like, you know, what is your future going to look like, you know, and, you know, how big of a, you know, a derailment from everything that you want for yourself, you know, now you've got to raise a child and deal with that. So there is those gut punches, and part of it too is just as a parent, what did I do wrong, you know? But I will say though, I remember being grateful that abortion wasn't on the table, you know, and she didn't like just, oh, I messed up and sneak around and go get an abortion so nobody can find out, and her life is not changed and she can just move forward. And so again, I understand some of the pressure of parents, especially non-Christian parents, to encourage their daughters to get abortions, you know, and things like that. Because again, you know, as a Christian, and you know, I wasn't on staff at the church or anything, but we were very involved in the church. I just remember too. And then one thing I want to tell parents, you know, one of the things to prepare yourself for is if you hear those words, don't make it about you, because that was one of the big things for me, was making it about me. Oh my gosh, you know, you are going to shame me. You're going to, you know, ruin my reputation as a parent. And so I understand some of the difficulties and the complexities of separating you from this situation. So I want to just encourage the parents that no, it's about them. And I loved what you said about, I don't remember who said it, but well, it's not so bad being a grandfather. You know?
Yeah. Actually, it was Meta's dad who said that. Yeah. So,
just the acknowledgement that the baby is a blessing,
Yeah.
even if it came about in situations that you don't prefer.
Yeah.
and I think that's a good leaping off point, because when we talk about the fear and the shame that churches in the past have spread, I think that's an important starting place, because Tressa, when we were talking about this last night, we were discussing the idea that many Christian women will choose abortion because of how we've treated young girls or women who've gotten pregnant out of wedlock. I forget what you were saying about that, but
Yeah, I mean, I think of one of my friends who, got an abortion and didn't tell anybody until she was a little bit older. But it was literally because of the shame, right? So, like, being pregnant was so shameful, so she hid it and then had to deal with it later. And I can remember, when she was dating and wanting to get married, she felt like, oh my gosh, like, who's, going to want to marry me if they find out what I've done, which if, the church had acted like you and Nancy did and welcomed the women that get pregnant in those situations, then they wouldn't have to hide and shame.
And it was a pretty common thing to throw shame in our culture towards any women.
Look in the Bible. Like,
right.
They were shaming the women in adultery and not necessarily the men.
And so one of the things that we've said, and we've said it on the podcast a few times, is anytime the church follows the world, we get it wrong. Right? Anytime we go with the cultural norms of the world and we don't evaluate the cultural norms of the world according to the scriptures, we throw it off. Like, is it bad that somebody was having sex before they were married? Well, yeah, it's going to make your life more difficult. You're not considering if you want the victory of being a sports person or get that degree or whatever, you're not considering those things. But that is the essence of the problem, right? That's the essence of the female dilemma when it comes to abortion and the arguments for abortion, is that abortion should be on the table because then I can continue to have my life. I can continue to move forward, right?
This is a very hard conversation because I'm like listening intently to what you guys are saying, and there's like a million different directions that we can be going. And you guys keep going in different directions that I'm expecting. And so I'm like, Stephen was talking and I was planning on saying something, and then you're talking and now you're talking. And
okay,
I'm like,
I think it'd be great.
I feel a little bit like,
I will say this.
oh my gosh.
So we're all
Welcome
over the
to
place.
my world. You're looking for that moment
I'm
to
not
sneak
sure,
something
like,
in. And
what to say. Oh my gosh. Guys.
just pound the table or raise your hand.
What I was going to say, last night we were talking about abortion, and we were talking about how Greg had said this a long time ago to me, that when the church follows the way that the world responds to sin, we always get it wrong. So, it wouldn't have taken a lot of effort with slavery for people to look into the Bible and see that the way they were treating the slaves was wrong and this isn't a good thing. And it wouldn't have taken a lot of effort to see that when we're dealing with, different same-sex attraction and different things like that, that we shouldn't be hateful and, mistreating people, right? When we follow the world and the way that they respond to things that they don't like, we get it wrong. And so with this situation, when women get pregnant, it doesn't take a lot of effort to read in the Bible and recognize that babies are a blessing, that you don't have to shame the woman for the baby, right? And that doesn't make the actions and how the baby came about correct in the best case scenario. But the baby is still a blessing. And I think that like what you and what Nancy did in welcoming Corinne and her child, and it wasn't just you, it was your whole family. Your whole family unit was their support,
And I will say, though, there was difficulty with that, too, in the sense that, okay, Corinne, had sex, she got pregnant. We know that's wrong. We know that's
Is she
sinful.
okay with us talking about her?
I will say I have permission. So,
Okay, good. I was like-
Also,
she is
we've seen their kid, so.
totally cool and comfortable.
Oh, that's amazing.
with
Okay.
it.
I just wanna make sure.
It's kind of like me, just like an open book.
Yeah.
I don't care. But one of the difficulties in that, I mean, I was happy that she chose life, and I understood that she was kind of in a place where she wasn't really walking right with God. But when she was pregnant, and we treated her like this is good. This is good that you're keeping the baby. We're looking forward to having a grandson. We didn't know it was a grandson at the time. And so Nancy got on board. My mom got on board. They were, throwing baby showers as it kind of went later in the thing. And part of the difficulty, really for me, and I don't know how much the women in my family dealt with this, was I wanted to see repentance. I wanted to see, what is that called? Where you
Contrition?
Contrition. I wanted to see this sorrow and brokenness in her for
The previous actions.
for the sinful acts that took place. And to me, I felt like if I saw more of that, I could be more joyful with her. But part of me was like, no, I want you. And this is an overstatement, but I kind of want you to suffer, through this and not be all joyful about it. And I am sure, looking back, I am sure that she inwardly dealt with a lot of that,
Her whole life was changing.
Yeah, so I will say that, yeah, we need to be kind. We need to treat them with love, and we can't just force, force that emotion and punish you if I don't think that you're being,
One of the things
repentant
that
enough.
I really appreciated about your sermon was that, the women bear the brunt of, child rearing, right? We carry the baby. We're the one that's deliver it. And so it's not as easy for us to just escape. Now, some women do. They abandon their children, but it's much more rare.
Yeah.
But I appreciated that you called out the men, because I really think that, that is part of this aspect of like calling people to not just, being contrite of like, oh man, I had sex before I got married, but really like, what is their responsibility now that they're parents, and really owning it and taking ownership. Like, look, I created a human being. Like, I created another person and I have to take care of it. And so I think not just for Corinne, but for the man involved, like they need to be called and held accountable to own up to that responsibility.
Abandoned.
And I will say, though, Dale did a great job. I mean, from day one, when she had Tucker, from day one, Dale would walk to her house and give her, child support money without ever a court hearing, without ever being told or without ever being asked. He just took on that responsibility and was a part of Tucker's life, from the get-go. And, and he even fought to be part, of Tucker's life too, where, and so I was very proud of him in that diligence. And through that, even though they were broken up and they had, a few years of being separated from each other relationally, they ended up getting married and raising Tucker together and having a daughter of their own. And, well, I guess Tucker
Both
was
of them
their
are
own.
their own.
But, it was, and they're still married to this day. So, it was a blessing that all worked out. So.
Well, I guess there's a tension here because like there are different groups of people with different responses. Like so in the church, you're going to have slightly different problems that you're going to have if you're dealing with this issue in the world, right? So there is a big difference between dealing with someone who's a Christian who has a baseline that you can discuss in abortion, and a difference between talking to someone who doesn't value that at all. And so what I liked about the sermon is that we are trying to say we need to have responsible parents, because as soon as the baby is conceived, it is alive and you become parents. I like that part, because if you're the person that thinks I'm just going to walk away, I don't know many Christian people that would do that, but I'm sure there are some that would just be like, I'm gonna abandon this kid. But they need to be told that they have a responsibility. That's easy to do. But also in the world, though, some of these values are different. Sometimes in some situations that I've encountered just with as a social worker, is all of the power is given by the state to the woman, and the man has no say at all. And so there is a balance between like saying to someone who's a Christian, you have a lot of rights in the state of California to do whatever you want, but you should, as a Christian, consider that he's a parent as well. Because sometimes those men go through things that I've known men that didn't want their child to be aborted, and then what do you do with that? And they're like, well, you're just a guy.
There's a TV show that I watched, and that very scenario was kind of displayed, and it was really heartbreaking because they were actually displaying a real issue. The boy, he gets this girl pregnant, and he doesn't have any say in whether or not she chooses that she wants to have an abortion. His parents are, fanatic Christians, and he finds out, and he doesn't want her to abort it, but he's a good secular boy, and so he lets her make the decision because it was her choice. And then his parents found out. I don't know what show this was.
Zoe?
No. His parents found out, and the mom calls and like berates the daughter or the girl and said, "You're killing my grandchild." And so like the show is portraying this as like this crazy Christian woman who is,
Friday Night Lights.
It wasn't, I don't know I cannot remember what show it was, but I remember being horrified because I'm like, that is a real situation where the boys don't have a say, and he really was willing to, support her through this. And I hated that they portrayed the mom. I don't agree. I don't think you should call the girl and tell her that she's a murderer. But as a grandparent, that you are losing something, like they are killing your grandchild. And so it really bothered me that they were portraying it like, it had like, what a silly woman, how could she insert herself in this situation when it's only the woman that's pregnant, and this whole conversation is so hard, but I think that it's very anti-female because the reality is that when women have sex, they can get pregnant.
Are you saying that abortion in and of itself is anti-female?
Yes,
Okay.
That's how I feel.
So flesh that out a little bit.
So I think that it's a denial of who women are. And it's literally trying to like skirt the like, oh, let's hide this because, we want you to be able to be like men and have sex and not have the responsibility of having a baby. We want you to be able to choose when you become a mother. The reality is that that's not how life works. Like, I don't get to choose when gravity affects me, right? Like, if I jump off of a building, gravity's going to come into play. If I have sex as a woman, my biology is going to come into play and I could get pregnant. And so I think that, when you're raised in a situation where you're taught to deny that, you really do think that you get to choose when you become a mother.
I didn't really think about that a lot of secular young ladies are being raised thinking that they get a choice, that sex is okay because you don't have to get pregnant. And as we read in several books that this is like we're training women to be the worst version of men. Mm-hmm. Like we get angry at men for abandoning these children,
or just having sex with everyone, and it doesn't, not even considering that
that commitment
may cause a child to be born, or that relationship might cause a child.
Right, and so then we're saying, well, no, this kind of feminism. I don't know if it's all forms of feminism. You've done more study in that.
There's several waves.
Yeah, they actually are trying to argue that we have the right to be as degenerate as degenerate men
and deny the whole female purpose. Like, I mean, we bring life and they're like, no, you can kill it, you don't have to live that way. It's so crazy to me because as a woman, like for me to be honored and me to be respected, I don't want to be treated like a man. I want to be treated like a woman, and I have different aspects to myself. I'm not the same as you guys, and so I think that
Are you saying you don't like poop jokes and fart jokes
I don't,
as much
actually.
as boys do?
I mean, some girls do.
Yeah, but I think what you're saying, I like how you put it when we're talking, is like having the potential to get pregnant and having a baby is one of the things that makes a woman a woman. And
Makes them unique.
it makes them
Different
a
from
woman.
men.
And that is part of their definition. And to say that we don't want that,
And we use the word potential purposefully because, some women have potential to get pregnant, but yet they are unable to because we live in the fall and something isn't working properly. But that doesn't mean that they don't have potential. Their body is still designed to house another human being.
right, which is crazy. They have an organ that its only function is to house another human, to bring that human to full term in life. There is no other purpose for the organ. That's amazing when you think about that. That is we talk about the definition of what a woman is. Well, that is one piece of that critical definition, and abortion is against that. And that's why you're saying abortion is anti-feminine. It is against women being truly women. That's right.
Yeah,
Did I
and
see
living
you
that
right?
out. Yeah. And I think that what we have to do as a society, instead of having the opportunity to have abortion, we need to have a society where we support women being women. And the fact is that women get pregnant. And so we have to have a culture and a society that supports that aspect of when women get pregnant. And so like Louise Perry, if you guys want to read about this, she wrote a book called The Case Against the Sexual Revolution. It's really good. And then
And she's not a Christian.
She's not a Christian yet.
She was working in a rape crisis center,
Yeah.
and it just broke her open to, I got to rethink my ethic, correct? That's
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. So like a lot of thought, I'm not really that familiar with this, but a lot of the thought is that rape is not a sexual thing, that it is like a power dynamic. And what broke that open for her was that all the women were in their prime sexually that were getting raped. Like the majority of rapes occur at a very specific age group. Now that there's outliers, but the majority of it is like, I can't remember. It's like in your 15 to 30 something. And so she's like, something sexual is going on here. This isn't just about power. And then she's just started understanding male sexuality in a different way. So that's what changed her. Anyways, but she talks about lots of different things with regards to women and getting pregnant and
Yeah, sexuality in general. And I think this is good because at this point, when we're now starting to address that abortion appears as an answer. Now, I said in the sermon that it's based on fear, and it's a trap. It was May the 4th, so we had to throw that in there. Thank you, Admiral Akbar. And I love that because it's true, and it sticks in my head that there's so many things in fear that are a trap. Abortion and abandonment being the two when it comes to this scenario. And so when we talked about, I want to go back eventually to this, but I do think it's important that we lay out kind of the biblical norm, why we are really claiming that that the Bible is against abortion. Because let's be honest, the argument is there's no verse that says you shall not have an abortion. Correct? Right, it's correct. There's no.
No, I
actual-
know. I'm thinking there's some pretty direct ones, but they don't actually say the word abortion. So.
Right, and I think a lot of people are looking for kind of this like, see right here, it says you shall not have an abortion.
Which is odd because it's a modern term, the way
Well,
that we use
They,
it.
they did have an ancient Greek word for it, and that it doesn't show up in anywhere in the New Testament. It does show up in the church fathers and the didache, which
the didache.
it actually says you shall not have an abortion. It's in that
Yeah.
one, which is very early, first century level text. It's just not in our Bible. But what is that trajectory coming from that the church has been universally against abortion? Contrary to what people say that we got on this bandwagon in the 1970s. The church has been the ones that ran out there and adopted babies when they were being exposed in the Roman Empire. The Jewish people were always against it with Molech and the sacrifice of children. There is a consistent case made throughout Scripture that every human being is made in the image of God. That's where we start, right?
Yeah.
Actually, I think that that's critical in two ways. Genesis 1 states that God made man in his image. In the image of God, he made them, male and female, he He made them, right? So he creates humanity to bear his image, and that means humanity always has inherent value. Humanity is made with inherent value, and that value isn't given nor taken away by any human being. It's given by the maker. So second, we don't belong to ourselves. That is probably the biggest lie that we have to deal with in our culture. Would you guys? What do you guys think?
We are not our own.
Yeah, we are not our own.
It sounded like you were saying that is the lie.
No,
we are not our own.
No, we are not our own.
No.
Is the truth. The biggest lie is to think that I am my own. I own my own life. In fact, I would say that's one of the biggest political divides. What divides a libertarian from a true conservative is the belief
Right.
that I get
It's
to
an
make my own
autonomous-
decisions. Nobody can tell me what to do. I'm an autonomous individual. No, you are made by a creator. You are a contingent. You didn't have to exist. You're here on purpose by somebody else's will and desire. That is like so undermining to so many people, and the entire movement of my body, my choice, all these things. But it also is the foundation point of all of human rights, to get to your argument on the social side of things, right?
Yeah, I mean, our country has really done a number on what human rights is, but in the sense that most people, if you ask them, do you believe in human rights? Do you believe people are, all created equal in some sense? That comes from
Thank you, Christianity.
that comes from the concepts from the Bible, and it's unique to the Bible because in the ancient world, other cultures had different names for people on lower caste systems. Like these are the humans, and then these are the not human slaves.
And these are the females.
And usually the females are somewhere at the bottom or the second rung of the ladder. But it was Christianity that uniquely came along and said, no, whether you call even a slave, even women, even men, no matter what, even foreigners from another country, another tribe, they're all created in the image of God, and they need to be valued.
And the reason we say Christianity and not Judaism, because Judaism does have the image of God, but it's uniquely applied in Christianity because Jesus Christ bears the sins of all human beings, regardless of whether they were prostitutes, tax collectors, Gentiles, Jews, male or female. Even in Judaism, there was still circumcision of the male. In Christianity, there's the baptism of all. There's no discrimination. And therefore, Christianity applies very uniquely this concept of human rights to all humanity.
It's hard for people to separate then, because you ask, well, how are people equal then? Because if there is no creator and there's no one that endows them with human rights, then we don't have them. We just make them up.
Where
You
does
have
it
a
come from?
utilitarian right,
Yeah.
They basically hijack Christian ethics, and then they...
Well, we like human rights. We just don't like where it
Yeah.
came from, right? And so, but the reason why I say that is because people will argue for the anti-slavery laws, where like these are not human beings, they're the 3/5 rule and all these things, and I'll be like, that was terrible, right? And they'll be like, yes, and because they were denied their human rights, great. They were also denied their constitutional right to vote or be represented or even be discussed because they were put in a second category. That was wrong too, right? And they'll go, yeah, that's wrong. Okay, so we took something away that's intrinsic to all humans. When does it become intrinsic to all humans? When do people get
When
human
you cross
rights?
the state line.
Yeah, that's the thing is like, and I've had
Or
conversations.
the magical womb.
Well,
When you
I've had
Yeah.
conversation.
Go
That's
through the womb.
where it goes is to the womb. That life happens after the womb. There's a whole argument that talks about SLED. That talks about different stages, like the difference between a fetus and a human and a baby, and it goes through this. That's usually the pro-abortion stance.
I think in the past that was really their emphasis, is that, well, it's not really a baby yet. So a lot of women were lied to and felt like, oh, okay, it's not really developed yet. So, I'm kind of getting ahead of it, right? I'm not really a mother yet. I'm going to be a mother. So we can get rid of it at the early stages. And then what happened with ultrasounds and stuff, it kind of blew that argument out of the water. And we see human development starting so young. And a lot of women, it changes their minds typically when they see their baby. But the problem now is that culture is going in a different direction, and it's not as much that argument anymore that, oh, it's not developed, and so therefore we can kill it.
Well,
now it's really more of like,
have a
you're
right.
your own
You're not
person, and you
wanted.
have a right to choose when you become a mother. It doesn't matter how developed that your baby is. And it's really just the frustration with the fact that women get pregnant when they have sex.
And I am not up on the newest laws, right? But, part of this movement where the women have the power in the decisions, if I got somebody pregnant, I couldn't say, no, you can't
can't have
abort
an-
it, right?
yeah.
So the woman has all the power in that. She gets to choose whether or not she's going to be a mother based on convenience or other things, right?
Well, she gets to choose the type of mother she's going to be.
Yeah. Yeah.
She's already a mother.
Ah, good point.
Yeah, it's her first action
but
as a mother.
As far as I know, at least it used to be where the dads didn't have a choice
Mm-hmm.
of whether or not they were going to be a father because, number one, she can abort it. If she chose to have it, I have to pay for it, And I didn't have a choice. I didn't have to go, I'm going to abort my right to, to raise
Yeah.
this child or to
Child
contribute to it financially. No, the law comes after the father to get, and they'll garnish your
Which is a
wages
good thing.
against your will.
We
And
don't
I'm
want
not-
that to
and
change.
I'm saying, as a Christian, I support those things.
Yeah.
But as a secularist, that just seems like, well, that doesn't seem right. That
Yeah.
that dad can't abort his
Well, because they don't
parental-
have a cohesive worldview, so
Right.
they're like stealing here and stealing there, and it doesn't make sense.
When
you know,
now, that's my basic point. When you lose Genesis 1:27, when you lose the image of God and the application as Christianity has brought it to all human beings,
it's literally the
heavenly
most
rights.
important thing that God taught us.
Right.
Right.
When you're
Then-
endowed by your creator.
then it
with
is
inalienable
whoever has
rights.
the power has the ability
Determines
to
the humanity.
determine what human beings
Yeah.
are or aren't. That's how you get genocide. That's how you get
get
mass
slavery.
abortions. That's how you get
It's all the
slavery.
same root, right?
It
And
is.
it's just you're just picking a different target. And the thing is that from ancient history, infanticide, killing of babies, is not new under the sun. Babies have always been killed, especially in pagan cultures. Like every pagan culture has killed babies or committed infanticide.
exposure,
even
yeah.
exposure. Yeah, this is not new. And so the fact that we're fighting this right now is just Louise Perry calls it the repaganization of America or of Western culture.
Let me go even a step further because I think in this, I want to, before I leave Genesis 1:27, we hit you mentioned SLED, and the idea is that we have to remind people that it's not a matter of the size of the human being that makes them
That's what SLED is.
human, right?
the
Yeah, I'm just kind of
location.
laying it out
Yeah.
for everybody. So SLED is size, location,
Environment.
Oh,
and development.
Degree of dependency.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
Okay. So
some
there's
people say development.
there's other ways of doing it, but like a person's a person no matter how small. Thank you, Dr. Seuss.
Yeah.
It's true.
Size doesn't determine whether you're human or not.
Right. Your genetics determine whether you're human, a one-celled human, or whether you're a multi-celled human. Whether I'm big and hulky or I'm little and skinny, whether I'm a tiny little toddler or an old man, it doesn't shrinking. That my size does not determine.
You're not 3/5
Well,
of a human.
and
at
that's
that point.
actually why we don't with the develop. Oh, sorry.
No, go
I
ahead.
I was going to say the development. When we think of like toddlers, or babies, they're very dependent on their mothers, their fathers, mostly their mothers, and you can't leave toddler alone. Like you could actually go to jail if you leave your house with the toddler in the
They're
house and you
dependent.
just abandon them. You're going to go to jail because they're dependent. So their development isn't enough to where they can take care of themselves.
In fact, the
So
more
it's kind of
dependent they are,
weird
the
that we
more
use the argument of like,
valuable.
oh, they're not developed enough to be called a human because there's varying degrees of development.
And how many babies, whether they're premature or maybe their lungs haven't developed, they have to go to NICU and go in an incubator, have 24-hour care, and they are completely dependent, but we would still say, no, they're totally
They're human,
a
yeah.
human life, and we need to do everything we can to save
Well, and
them.
one of the things that comes from the Christian ethic is if we value life at this way, that's where all this technology comes from. Like the ability to keep a 25-week-old baby alive is because we value life, right? If we didn't value life, then we would just be like, oh, baby was born too early, let it die, right? But now we have this amazing technology that can keep it alive because we feel the weightiness of human life.
It's also then the realization that location is also one of those things. This is the Dred Scott case. Just because the human being crosses a fictitious state line or a legal line, now they're human. No, they're no longer human. And so obviously location doesn't determine whether you're a human or not, what state you're in, what location you are. That we all would say that's silly. The same thing is true with whether you're conscious or not, sense of development.
Physically or mentally, the level of your development.
Right, because look, if it's about being self-aware or not, then you are no longer a human when you're put under surgery.
Right.
If you're put under by
You
some
lose your
kind of
human
drug,
rights.
you lose all your human rights. So now the doctor can do whatever he wants
Yeah.
to your
'Cause you're
body
unconscious.
because you're unconscious. You're not a human at that point.
Or
just a
if
big
you're
piece of meat.
unconscious because you drank too much,
Right.
you're not a human being. You don't have any
Or you
rights.
have cognitive decline, or you have some kind of
Yeah.
Exactly. So we can just then say all of these people out there with the cognitive destruction from drugs and walking our streets, they're not humans.
yeah.
That is not okay. As I said in the service at the sermon, our church at least is never going to declare anybody shouldn't live.
Yeah.
Like this is Genesis 1:20. That is that image of God stuff. And so environment, all those things, there is the only way to determine a human value is that God has given them that human value. Otherwise, people are going to have a hard time grounding that human value. I really do think so. You can make natural law arguments, but again, I think that it goes back to this Genesis 1:27 conversation. That's like, or do unto others you have them do to you.
Or
kind
the
of
Constitution, you
utilitarian.
have you've been endowed by your Creator with certain inalienable rights, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. When does that happen? When is it granted to
Right.
you? And people will say
when
we
you're
give
created,
it to,
because
we,
it's a creator that gives
Yeah.
it to you.
That's why we say that, because if it is us that determine who is human and who's not, we are putting ourselves in the form of the state telling you that I can remove your humanity at any time if I declare it. And there are many states that have done this. We've had people do this in Nazi Germany. We've had people do this in our own country with slavery. They've decided that this person
Right.
is not human anymore and took away their human rights. And so that's my question is these are human beings. They have rights. When do they get it?
Yeah.
And usually people will say after they're born.
Yeah. Which is really sad
Who
because
says this?
I thought about this years ago. I had this thought and I realized, oh my gosh, like the most safe place for a human being should be in its mother's womb. And it's actually the most dangerous place.
In the modern era, it is.
Right now, like more babies die inside the womb than outside. And that's a terrifying thought.
It is terrifying, especially when we consider another biblical argument is that one of the Hebrew words for love was actually
Oh, it was compassion.
is derived from the term the womb.
Yeah.
And it's the idea that God is protecting you and cares about you so greatly that he holds you like you're in your mother's womb. It's supposed to be safe. In fact, the other thing is every time the womb conversation happens, God's always speaking in the scriptures of this as a true person. Like in Psalm 139, for you form my inward parts. You knit me together in my mother's womb. There's a me here. There's a person here. I praise you. I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. I talked about the Luke chapter 2 passage where John the Baptist is excited because Jesus is present. I know there was a question on that. Do you want to hit that question? Just because I want to make sure we kind of go
Yeah.
categorically too. And so there was
From Debbie.
yeah.
Her question that she sent in was, when discussing the sermon with my roommate, this one?
No, it was the John the
This one.
Baptist passage right here.
Oh, okay. How did John the Baptist know that when Jesus came, he would baptize with the Holy Spirit?
Oh, okay. So that wasn't about the text. Got it. So
Okay, this one was.
yeah, go. Sorry, I messed up.
Okay, when discussing the sermon with my roommate, they asked what the church's stance would be if the mother's life was in danger.
Okay, so that's a good question in the
We'll
sense
get to
of
it
back
later, or
to
you wanna
no,
get to
the
it now?
Genesis 1:27 addresses that. And so if the child and the inside is truly human, then you try to save both. That is the ethical reality. And there is a point where you can't. But you attempt to save
But you're
life.
not purposefully murdering or killing the embryo. You're trying to save the life of a mother. And that's
Right.
the distinction ethically is
It is the distinction.
it's not
the
a
motive
purposeful
is
murdering
different.
of a
And this is a bad analogy, but it'd be the same view of the way we look at killing someone is there's a big difference between murder and self-defense.
right. Yeah. No,
You
no.
know.
Right. Yeah.
So
In the same way, like now, I also think that we need to have an ethic of life in the sense that if we believe that everyone created in the womb, which is there, everybody goes through the womb, at least right now they do.
Well, you can have C-sections.
Well, what I mean by that, I said womb.
Well, they
not-
still are in
yeah,
the
in the
uterus.
womb. I didn't
Come
say
from
that.
mom.
I didn't say my point is that child that is being formed in the womb
Yeah.
is a human being. that human being has inherent value, made in the image of God. Even if it's an ectopic pregnancy, that baby has value. Now, the problem is with an ectopic pregnancy and various forms like that, because I know there's other conditions, that baby is going to kill the mom if the baby survives. My issue is if we don't have an ethic for life and try to
wouldn't
save
survive.
both,
Yeah, I was going to say the baby wouldn't survive.
right,
It would
the baby
basically kill
survive at
both.
that
both
moment.
die, and that's the point,
Yeah.
right? In an attempt to save the mother, we're trying to save the mom, the one that we can save. But if we had an ethic to try to save both, and we were serious about that, science would progress towards trying to figure out a way to remove the ectopic pregnancy and reimplant it successfully within the uterus. Not saying that we're not doing that. I'm just saying
We
that
just haven't gotten there yet.
if there's no moral imagination for that, then there will be no dollars or scientific endeavor towards it. This is why the moral imagination of Christianity is greater. It can open up life-saving maneuvers and techniques that bring about beauty. But it's also why the Christian ethic is smarter, because we also know in the discovery of even that, there is potential for sin. There is some way that can be twisted. And so we have to be careful on all these fronts to consider what we're doing. But I just want to point out that that's the kind of the vision I would hope Christians would grab, is this picture of like saving both lives is important if we can. But it's always the motive.
And I do think to go back to the murder versus self-defense motive, I mean, you can find a doctor that will say anything, and then it's like, okay, this is self-defense, I need to abort the baby. But really in the court of law, self-defense is your life is in imminent danger, and if somebody's just yelling at you and you're scared and you kill them, that's not self-defense. If they're running away from you, that's not self-defense,
Yeah.
When it comes to the abortive issue in that, your life seriously needs to be
Yeah.
in jeopardy.
I
in
think
that
really
case.
a large portion, I think, within the church, obviously, but just in general, I think women just truly owning the fact that they are women and that they're female and that they can get pregnant and kind of owning that.
Yeah, this
Like,
is
this is
the
the reality, and I
form
think-
of femininity or womanhood is
'cause
the fact that you can give life.
I feel like
no one else can. Men can't do that.
I struggled in junior high. I can remember, you start learning about everything and you're learning about sex and you're learning about all this stuff. And to be honest, as a girl, like I was young and I was terrified of giving birth. I mean, I had learned that, in the olden age, like people died from it, and I thought, oh, how horrible. Like, I don't want to die to give birth. And then also it's really painful and that sounds terrible. And I remember telling myself at 12 that I would not have a baby because, that sounds horrible. And then also I remember one day my friend and I were talking, and the idea of like, and this is just the reality for women, like, oh my gosh, if I'm raped, I could get pregnant from that. And I remember her and I sitting in the back of my mom's car talking about it. And we were both terrified, just that vulnerability that we felt. And it's kind of an overwhelming thing. And I think for me, because I processed all that, like I went through it, I was able to get to the other side. And when I was in 9th grade, I was really wrestling and felt like, oh my gosh, women get the bad end of the stick, and we're used, and we have to give birth, and it's painful, and we just get the bad end of the stick in life, and men are more fun, and it's just, I hate being a woman. And my friend was like, oh my gosh, like,
And this is a guy.
this is a guy, and he's like, no, I'm so jealous. Like, you guys, like a human being forms inside of your body and then you give birth to it. It's like the most amazing thing in the whole world. I'm jealous of that potential,
You get
Teresa.
to have an intimate relationship with the child.
Yeah.
Before any guy does.
And
We're just
honestly,
on the outs.
it completely changed my perspective. Like, it was the beginning of me falling in love with being a woman and like realizing what a gift it was and not being afraid now that doesn't mean that fear went away fully, because there is a vulnerability with being a woman. And I think that's why it's important in the church to raise men to protect and care for women properly, and so anyways, so it is a big deal, but I do think that a lot of this comes down to the fact that women have to really own being women and what that means.
There is differences, and because I do remember a lot of through Nancy's pregnancy and even when we had the baby, Alyssa, our first one, there was a jealousy in me a little bit, with the idea that once we had the baby, she seemed to have this connection with Alyssa, and Alyssa wanted her, and and I almost felt like useless, okay, I can sit here and hold it and give Nancy a break, but she wants her mom, and so I felt like I was kind of like on the outside looking in on this relationship, and like, I can't wait till they get to that next stage where I can interact with them, and and so there was part of that, but the whole labor and delivery part, Nancy was in labor for 21 hours with Alyssa. And so, I felt bad for her, but I had to sit in this lazy boy chair for 21 hours watching TV while she was over there making noise, and I had to keep turning it up. My legs fell asleep. It really is not the pleasure cruise that you think fatherhood is,
Brenton's terrible jokes. So that let's move forward. Because there's more in the Bible about this. Because I kind of want to overwhelm not just that we're made in the image of God, not just that every child in the womb in the Bible is considered a human being. Then there's some very interesting texts that I've done study enough on that I believe are the places where it's saying you should not have an abortion, almost in those terms. First and foremost is this very strange section in the book of Exodus, chapter 22. This is the law section where Israel is being given kind of an expansion on the Ten Commandments and how it would apply to various circumstances. This is an interesting one because it says, if a man seduces a virgin who is not betrothed and lies with her, he shall give the bride price for her and make her his wife. So this is about premarital sex. If her father utterly refuses to give her to him, he shall pay money equal to the bride price for virgins. Then verse 18 goes, you shall not permit a sorceress to live. Moving on, whoever lies with an animal shall be put to death. Huh? Whoever sacrifices to any god other than the Yahweh alone shall be devoted to destruction. You shall not wrong a sojourner. And then it kind of moves. You're like, what in the world does this have to do with the widow and the fatherless and suddenly sacrificing to other gods and lying with animals? And like, well, that is a weird section. And scholars wonder, why does this sorcerer permit a sorceress to live sitting here? Well, I dove into this question, and the word sorceress is actually a potion maker. She is a woman who would create potions, and that potions could be for, trying to gain health. Typically, we would think of it as a shamanistic kind of
medicine man.
Medicine woman, medicine man. That's what a sorceress is. She's a potion maker for the sake of healing herbs and things like that. In fact, this is translated later in the Septuagint, the Greek translation of the Old Testament, as pharmakeia. And what's interesting about it is, if you are going to get an abortion in the ancient world, they didn't have instruments. They didn't have ways of opening you up and cutting the baby out. They gave you.
Well, they didn't know they were pregnant as early.
Right. No, you had to be older. You knew
They're
later.
probably further along.
You'd miss a couple, and it would be way further along, 4 to 6 weeks or more. And so you went to see a sorceress who would form a concoction of potion that would give that to you. And then you would abort it's a chemical abortion. Why do they not permit the sorceress to live? Because she was the one who, by the way, if you seduce a virgin and got her pregnant, that's probably who you would go see. It's in context because it also fits in with the bestiality stuff and in sacrifice, which, by the way, those two events prior, in verse 19 and 20, are associated with fertility rites to make sure that your crops and your animals and things would grow, and you would use in those fertility rites to make sure the crops and things would grow aborted baby parts, aborted fetuses. All of this is connected to abortion in the ancient world, and the Bible is very clear at this point over and over. In fact, very often when Molech is mentioned, where they would sacrifice their firstborn children, which is always opposed, that is connected again to warlocks, witchcraft, and these kinds of things. No, we're not talking about Harry Potter witchcraft and go burn your Harry Potter books. No, we're talking about real life potion making and things that they were trying to use to empower or to adjust fate, the gods, the demons, stop physical things from happening, and then they would use this. So this passage, actually what's interesting is you follow forward with the term pharmakeia, and it shows up in the New Testament as this is not something you engage with. You don't engage in magic use. You don't engage in sorcery. And so what's fascinating is that this is also the term, I'll just read it to you. Galatians chapter 5, verse 19. Now the works of the flesh are evident: sexual immorality, impurity, sensuality, idolatry, sorcery. It also sits very closely with the sexual portion, and then it goes into the arguments of enmity, strife, jealousy, fits of anger, rivalries, dissensions, divisions, envy, drunkenness, orgies, and things like these. So strangely, sorcery, again, fits close to the sexual and idolistic concepts, the use of magic. Why? For the sake of abortion. In fact, this is the term, that term for sorcery will be the primary term used by the church fathers to argue against abortion. And with the use of the new chemical abortions that are available through the mail, it is outlawed by that text alone that this is not, that Christians should not be engaged in this kind of work. That is a no abortion stance. Now, to me, that is a lock case. But there are further cases along with, don't kill the innocent that I brought up on Sunday, and a very strong argument. You can go back to our Acts. When we went through Acts, I went into how the 4 rules given to Gentiles at the Jerusalem Council of don't eat anything with the blood kept in it, do not get involved in sexual immorality. Then there's don't worship idols. And the last one is don't eat strangled things. People didn't eat strangled things. In fact, there's no evidence except for a cookbook that comes 300 years later about cooking something that's strangled. And that's the only reason it ends up there. But that term very fits well in the Old Testament connection with those same 4 things. And the last one fits with Molech worship of killing your children. And so the Gentiles being told, don't strangle your children, which is a way that they would kill newborn infants. They would strangle them and get rid of them. That was a form of abortion in the ancient world. That too is an outlaw against abortion in my mind. All of these things are very clear to me in Scripture, so that, the trajectory that erupts from the Bible and the New Testament world is abortion is a non-starter. Even chemical abortion, which was more known in the ancient world than the current physical abortion.
One of the things you brought up was abortion is the killing of an innocent, and you talked about even, the argument for abortion is, rape and incest. And it's like, why make the innocent baby the other victim in this, right? And so the killing of aborting of a baby is killing an innocent. And when I used to teach Starting Point years ago, I would always, week 1, we'd introduce each other, and I'd always ask them, if you could ask God one question, what would it be? Overwhelmingly, over the years that I did that, overwhelmingly, the question that they would want to confront God about is, why did you allow evil things to happen? And so we would just kind of take that through, like, okay, then define what's evil, And so they'd start talking about, this is evil and this is evil and murder and this and, and it really, it's like, okay, you want to stop all evil? You want to stop it all from all time, And so we kind of whittled down, and it always ended up that the most vile evil is the evils that are perpetuated against children,
The innocent.
The innocent, and that really is what it came down to. The children are the most innocent, and so that is the most hideous evil, is to do it to children. And so when we're talking about abortion, and we're talking about them being children and their babies in the womb, the safest place that we could think of, that is no longer the safest place, it's like, this is the evil of evil, And so again, I also want to just say, if any of you out there have had an abortion, like maybe you had one before you came to the Lord, maybe you had one and you regret it and you struggle with it, we are not trying to beat you up, I do think that, if you are being beat up about it, then you realize just how devastating this is, and it should drive us to warn other people to not enter into this misery that's going to follow them.
And seek healing.
And seek healing. And I brought up this quote that I saw. And so, again, get healing, find healing. And this was something that a therapist said. It's like, you're not healing to be able to handle trauma, pain, anxiety, and depression. You're used to those. You're healing to be able to handle joy and accept happiness back into your life, you know? And so really that is really what healing is not just to diminish what abortion is, because I do think that when you hear that from your child, I had an abortion or whatever, you know, talk to them, make them feel loved and supported, not make them feel better about the decision. Like, oh, abortion's not that bad. And so we don't want to diminish the act, but we want to bring healing and a confidence that they can move forward with it. And I like that the idea that therapy is so that you can bring joy back into your life, not that you can diminish what you did and be comfortable with it.
If they were to look for that, I know, Chris, we got an email from somebody. If they were to look for healing and help, can you let them know where they can find that?
Oh, yes. Sorry.
I'm like, you're setting yourself up.
I know. I that was a good segue that I totally missed. But Christy Moore sent us an email, and in this, I'll just read it. My name is Christy Moore. I am an Olive Branch member and a Zoe volunteer. Some people might know Zoe as Corona Life Services.
Zoe.
Huh?
Means life.
Zoe means life. It used to be called Corona Life Services. I'm writing to ask that you'd be willing to give more details about Zoe post-abortion healing program during the next podcast. I think it's hard for women to know how to get started on the healing journey. So if we can give them as much information as possible, I think that could be helpful. Currently, we are doing one-on-one support, but we are making a push to do small groups as the program was intended. The program typically takes 9 weeks in sessions. We use the book Forgiven and Set Free. Everyone is welcome, Christian or not. However, it is a Bible-based program. And they can enter their info and they'll reach out. So you can reach out to them at C Moore, and that's C as in Christy, Moore, Moore, at meetzoi.com. C Moore at meetzoe.com. So she also said you can call her. So if you want the phone number, I'll give it to you. I don't want to throw it on the air here. But you can just email us at rabbittrail@obcc.church, and we will give you the links and we will give you the phone number to contact. But again, I know people who have gone through this program, and I don't know if it's this one specifically, but they found a great deal of healing through this program. So I would encourage you if you're struggling with it.
Meet Zoe's got a lot of great. I'm just pulled up their website, meetzoe.com, and they've got options from pregnancy verification, some limited ultrasound abilities, but they'll educate. They'll do parenting classes with you. Mm-hmm. They'll give you post-abortion support. They'll give you option consultation, miscarriage support. So if you've miscarried, it is just as painful. You did not abort your child. This is like, that needs to be clarified because there's a lot of misconceptions about abortion out there right now that are going around. And they also do men's advocacy. So if you're a man who needs help, they help walk you through that decision.
Can you add that to the notes in the podcast?
The other thing is our church does have a pro-life ministry, and we actually are looking at doing two things a year that talk about like how to argue for pro-life and how to be involved. And so you can also get in touch with me as well, and I can put you in touch with that team that works with Zoe and Elsinore, Lake Elsinore.
And I think, so that, you were talking about getting counseling if you've had an abortion. They also do counseling if you're in a crisis pregnancy, but also like if you're a part of Olive Branch, I just wanted to throw it out there that like, don't keep it quiet. Like if you get pregnant, if you're a woman, like come and tell us and tell somebody that in the church. And that's what we're here for. That's what Zoe is there for. Like come and they'll surround you with the support that you need to be able to either adopt out your child or to raise your child.
And this goes for not only those of you who are, unmarried and maybe, or someone who's unmarried. It's also for those of you men and women who think that, we've got too many kids. There have been a lot of people opting for abortion as like control of the number of children in their family. And again, I'll just go back through all these arguments. That's just, I don't know how you choose that. I know there are people who have, but like, let us know. We want to help you through that process. It's not the end of the world. We have 4 children.
The other
We made it. Just kidding.
Well,
No,
it might be
it's
more for them,
super
yeah.
difficult, and you need help. You need help navigating that route. There are other people who've gone through same things. Like we have, the church wants to help and love people. It's not about that's just not it's not an option. Don't choose that.
just
option.
be careful too, because one of the stories that surrounds Zoe was the fact that my sister had a high risk pregnancy and they couldn't find the heartbeat for my niece, and so she was being strongly encouraged by her medical profession to take an abortion, even though she was a Christian. So she's being pressured, saying, and she's like pushing back, I don't believe in this. I don't believe in this. And like, well, and they kind of just like left her hanging. So she went to Zoe to get just prenatal care. And they found the heartbeat, and then we gave that information back to her healthcare provider. There's just a lot of people that are not giving you the full information, and they're also not telling you. They're just making it super convenient as an option, but they're not telling you the risks that are involved. And so even for Christians being pressured and you're not getting the prenatal care, I would recommend just at least calling Zoe and saying, what do you recommend I do? Because they've helped a number of just Christians who are pro-life that are being strongly encouraged by their profession to get that abortion, because they really make you feel scared, like, oh, you're going to die and all this stuff.
I know there was a big problem in that there are these genetic screenings that they'll do in utero, and they were starting to show that their accuracy is not as good as they're claiming it was. And I'm trying to look up some of those details, but I do know for a while, and I'm sure that you can get out there and look this stuff up, but there's just been a couple things. One is that those screenings can oftentimes be very wrong. I just in an anecdotal conversation with people in our church, I've met 7 to 8 women who all were told that they shouldn't have their child because they were going to have some kind of abnormality. All of those children are normal. They all had those kids. And so it's like that's a problem. And then the second issue is that like people are being told that these pills are the best way to do it. It's safe. And there was just this massive study that came out last like 3 days ago or something.
Yeah, it was pretty recent.
That was showing that this is extremely dangerous.
Well, one of the biggest issues is that the reason why you're supposed to see a physician with the birth control pill, I don't know what it's called, but
Plan B?
methylpristone?
It's like
Is that the amount you take depends on how far along you are. And so many of these women are just getting it online. They're not seeing anybody, and they're estimating their distance in their pregnancy wrong, and then they're ending up in the emergency room. The amount of women that have ended up in the emergency room because of the abortion pill is skyrocketing right now.
Wow.
And it's pretty terrible.
Now, I also want to bring up one final thing because there's some other aspects to this, because there is a disappearance of Down syndrome children because of abortion. They're not in our society. I grew up and they were like in school with us, and and there's an entire generation, I think it's Iceland, who celebrated there's been no Downs children born because they aborted them all, which is a horrific thought. Again, I don't think humans should be stating that anyone should not have a chance at life. One of our elders, when he was a pastor, had to walk a woman through the fact that when she was having her child, she found out there was a fetal abnormality. The brain was developing outside of the cranium, which can cause sepsis and will kill the mother. And so she had to walk through that. They went through a process where they didn't abort the baby, but they did an early birth basically, and let her.
They
hold
put her
the
into
baby,
labor.
Put her into labor. Let her hold the baby as he died on her chest. And look, that may seem awful, but that child dies being loved.
Yeah.
That
Also
that
might bring closure
process
to some
allows
people.
Closure, right?
Yeah, I think that the lie, this is really hard to escape because abortion is so not seen. But like a lot of times people say,
Convenient, yeah.
"Oh, this is the loving way out," right? If the child has, deformities and they're going to die really quick, and they're like, "Oh, the child's going to die anyway, so let's just abort the baby." But abortion is not this like great procedure. It's a terrible
Has trauma
procedure.
of its own.
So it's not like you're giving your child an easy way out. They're being killed in a terrible way. And then with the birth control pill, you're putting yourself at risk because it's not necessarily safe, especially if you're not seeing a physician. So there's that part. But then there's also, we didn't even discuss, So many of Planned Parenthoods, the abortion facilities are in, poverty-stricken areas.
Oh, yeah.
This is a class issue. Like, the majority of people getting abortions are lower class.
It's lower
poor,
the African American
and it's
communities,
mostly in African American,
or
and
in Hispanic communities.
and that's an evil thing.
It is, and the majority of those who are aborted are women, are girls.
Yeah.
At least globally speaking. The intensity of all this is just, again, this is why I actually consider abortion a demonic concept. Demonic ideas. We're not, and this is critical because I think that we can get into being very angry at other humans versus seeing humans as deceived by an evil concept. Like, what species wants to kill its own kids except a deceived one? I mean, we're literally deceiving ourselves into destroying the image of God. That's exactly what the demonic wants. They want to destroy, kill, steal, and destroy. And I believe demonic doctrines, as the Bible would call them, lead to death, lead to stealing value. One of the things we said is that abortion opens the door to commodification of children.
And convenience, yeah.
It turns them into something you own. Turns them into something that's about you, not a blessing from the Lord, not a responsibility to care for, but now you can select whether you want your child to have this hair color or that hair color. And if they're not good, then just get rid of them and move on. What? Like that turning them into a commodity, something to buy, is the ultimate. That you've just reinduced slavery. We're just buying and selling people for prices for what? For your convenience. And abortion opens that door. It's another reason it has to be closed.
Oh man, we didn't even touch on IVF and how abortion is
Connected
in that whole world. But yeah,
not to mention how there's just, again, we can't hit all the tendrils, but you can see how if you get back to the core issue of human value, that's the standpoint. And I get that value lies in the mother, the father, and the child in total. You can't divorce any of those because they're all part of it. I mean, this gets into the definition of marriage. This gets into the definition of sexuality. All that.
Well, and I think once you make the argument, okay, so abortion we do consider it murder, and it isn't something that as Christians we believe is okay. I think that then you have to go to, okay, then what are the reasons why people are having abortions still? And especially within our church, right? What would be the motivating factor? Typically it's, okay, there's shame and maybe just they don't want to be pregnant at that point. And I think that is something that as a church we have to really think through of how are we going to support the young people, or like you said, older people that are getting pregnant when they don't want to, and be a church that provides a safety net, I guess, and to some degree for people that find themselves in that position, so they don't feel like they have to abort, because that's so often is, women get pregnant and they're not ready to be mom, right? And they're like, oh, this isn't what I was planning for my life.
And there's room. I know our pro-life ministry would love to help bring about support groups that meet together in those cases. I know that we'd be willing to try to work. We give towards different pregnancy centers and like Zoe. And so sometimes we can't rebuild the same thing, but we can definitely support those who are doing that. We would encourage anyone who wants to be a part of this to volunteer in one of those two areas to help build some of these pieces out. It's a desperately needed thing. And look, your financial support to Olive Branch, to a group like Zoe is needed. Vision runs off of finances and off of volunteering time. And if you're interested in helping in these areas, look, we can't see places expand if needs aren't covered and finances aren't there. That's the same thing with Zoe. They do so dig into that. Pray to the Lord. Is that another way? Maybe you don't feel like you have the time to give a voice or to do something, but you have financial means. Consider giving a gift to Olive Branch or to one of these pregnancy life crisis pregnancy centers, and put some stake in there. Jesus says, "Where your heart is, there your money will be," kind of thing. So, or where your money is, there your heart is. And so it's a great option as well. And because there are too many things. And I think that the other piece I want to just say is, I know we didn't cover the politics, and I think my purpose was to avoid it. The politics are a result of this ethical conversation. And we can have that conversation another time. But I also want to just say that some of us want to fight the political battle when we need to fight the personal ones.
Yeah, spiritual ones.
The spiritual and personal ones. What I mean by a personal battle is to care for the people in our lives, in our city, who are in this situation. It does not have...
And that we can be the kind of people that people would confess to. And that they... Because you can't help them if they don't tell you the circumstances that they find themselves in. So we have to be the kind of a church where people are willing to come and they feel safe.
And can be honored appropriately for keeping their babies and showing the love of Christ in that way. And for men to stay in the game like Dale did and like Corinne did. I just love that. And then lastly is just to realize that we've got to continue in those veins of love and dealing with people personally in our local area, because it's not about making abortion illegal. It's making it unthinkable. And that's really the aim in the community, is to make it unthinkable. And so,
yeah, and I want to thank Corinne, first and foremost, for making us grandparents. Even if it wasn't in the most, ideal situation. Few years pass, you forget all about all of that, and it's just your grandson, and you love him. And he's great. So I want to thank you for making us grandparents, but I also want to thank you for allowing me to share your story. I know you've shared your story numerous times, and you do so to help others through it. And so I appreciate that. And, and again, this whole conversation is just one part of it, but it just goes back to, God set parameters of, what is the best, and the good way. And that really is why, we're supposed to remain chaste until we marry, and that is where the sexual relationship takes place, is within the confines of a married relationship. And I just feel like abortion wouldn't really be an issue. Sexual diseases wouldn't be an issue. There are so many emotional self-worth issues that would not exist is like they do if we stayed within the confines of what God has ordained for us. And so
we were getting a chance to talk to Christine last night, and she brought that, kind of summed what you just said up in a simple way. She's like, the big difference that she finds in her life from where she was to where she is that she really comes to realize that because God makes us, like, doing it his way, whether we like it or not, is always the better way. And that is so contrary to every way we think as Americans, because we want to be autonomous. We want to make our own choices but it's remembering that, sometimes I got to do what my Creator said because he made me that way. And I may not even like it, but it's still the best.
Yeah. And I do think that we can control the outcomes and the consequences. Yeah. And I know that there's a lot of people in this world that think, okay, well, yeah, we had sex, nobody got pregnant or anything, no harm, no foul. But you know what? God says that when you do that, there is a unity that takes place, in your souls that you can't separate from. And the more partners you have, I think the less able you are to really connect on such a deep level as if it was your...
They are showing that while you can, it takes healing. You can return to innocence. And it's an oxytocin thing where you're building bonding and stuff like that. The danger is that whether in all forms of sexuality, there is a bonding agent that goes on. And you can return, but you got to do some work. It does take some therapy, some help, some like... definitely abstinence and fasting and stuff, but it is not. You're not like I'm just trying to avoid the purity culture's concept of like you're damaged goods and you can't.
Yeah, well, that's what I was gonna say. The beautiful thing about God is that He calls us to a certain way, and we don't meet it, and He still redeems. And He makes good out of our ashes. Right. So even when we do make mistakes,
and
we come back.
Love is tough. Love is hard. It's not an easy thing. And I think that's the part I just want to continue to reiterate.
Yeah.
And this is the sleepy time music.
So,
So those of you laying in bed listening to the podcast so you can fall asleep, I hope we help.
You're welcome. Yeah. So, Stephen, any last words?
Now, that's not going to make any sense if nobody heard that.
Right. I know. Don't worry about it. A lot of this didn't make sense for some people. So,
Last words would be thanks, Mom, because like I know when my mom, she lost a lot of babies with miscarriages, and they told her she was never going to have a child, and she had me and my sister, and they were both very high risks, but I'm sure abortion could have been on the table. So I'm thankful for her first choice is to, hey, I want to be a mom. I think of it as a I think of it as a superpower, but for me, I'm just thankful that my mom valued life and that I'm here. So thanks, Mom.
And I want to thank my wife for being here. Thank you, Tressa.
Hey, Tressa.
And I also want to thank you for being an awesome mother who walks our kids through this stuff and somebody who thinks about it and talks about it. I love that our kids have had these conversations, and we also just want to continue to say, if you're wondering, like, how do you do that? We would love to talk. Let us know. But thank you for being the woman that you are.
It's fun to be here.
So if you are got any more questions, I'm sure we will hit more questions next week as we dive into some other issues, but it's another biggie next week, so we'll see how that goes. But we're just glad that you joined with us, and we're praying for you that your week is good. If you have questions, drop us a line. We have an email, rabbit trail at obcc.church. That's rabbit trail at obcc.church. We're glad you joined us. Have a great week. God bless you. Share this if you think it'll help somebody. But we'll see you next time.
Chakalaka.
Bye.